John, are you wearing AirPods? Or
Oh.
anything? Are you wearing like AirPods or anything, or do you just talk and?
No, I just talk and listen. Do you wear AirPods?
Sometimes I do, but they were acting funny, so I'm not. But I think
Mine acted funny during a session earlier today, so yeah, I decided against it.
okay.
Yeah.
But you hear me okay?
Yeah. Plus, they fall out of my ears at like,
In
my
opportune
ears
time.
are misshapen, like wildly misshapen, so it just never works out.
Yeah. Especially during the dance portion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really concerned about that actually.
Our opening number.
Yeah.
If you do it right, it's hard to keep AirPods in.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the cartwheel part that really throws me.
Exactly. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when mine fell out.
All right, wait just a minute or two. Looks like people are still logging in. Yeah, we've got to wait. Everyone has to be here for the cartwheel part.
We may have oversold that.
Well, Heidi did say something about a tap routine.
I did, right. I actually do cartwheel and tap shoes because
Oh.
it just sounds cooler.
It really did in rehearsal, I gotta say. I was super skeptical, being a
And then
seasoned dancer.
You don't hear the AirPods clack to the floor then, because all you hear is
And if you do, it adds a little something.
totally. Remember when, like tap shows were all the thing, like Bring It to Noise, Bring It to Funk, and Tap. Was it Tap Dogs? Or there were like a few of them.
Right. And now there's a like, are you on TikTok? Are you watching the guys TikTok
Do I
dancing?
not seem cool? What do you mean? Am I on TikTok? No,
I'm just wondering, maybe your daughter can introduce you. I don't know, like it's a new social media device. Heidi, I'll show you one day.
Sydney, we went on, whose show did we used to go on WGN every week?
On
Ada Devanta's.
we were on WGN.
She's like, "Did you come on and talk about the dangers of TikTok?" And I was like, "Ooh, what is it?"
The dangerous, I don't know what it is yet.
John, like, what the heck is a TikTok? I mean, in our defense, that was like 3 years ago, though. That was like
It was new then.
yeah. Yeah, she was like, my 8-year-old uses it. I was like, oh.
Oh
God.
boy.
Let me Google that.
Yeah.
I don't like to know less than an 8-year-old.
All right. Well, it's a few minutes after 7. We will go ahead and get started because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. My name is Sydney Clark. I'm one of the librarians here at the Winnetka-Northfield Public Library, and we're thrilled you could all join us tonight. This is almost like our third time's a charm for this program. We were supposed to do it a couple of months ago, and then we rescheduled it, ideally trying to do it in person this week, and then it worked out much better to do it virtually. So we're glad that all of you could join us. And without further ado, I'm really just going to turn it over to Heidi and John, because as you can see, they're incredibly comfortable talking to one another. So if anyone has questions throughout the evening, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will be monitoring that. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi and John.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thanks, Sydney.
I don't think I was fully aware that we were actually being broadcast during that little banter.
No, nor was I. I'm mortified to revisit it.
Same, actually. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I miss you. We don't really see each other anymore.
No, it's been weird. Just like for everybody else, it's been an odd year for us, right? We were doing a podcast. We were meeting every week, and then we did it virtually every month, and then every 6 months, and then once after that.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah, life's changed a lot in a really short period of time.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
I think both of our listeners said they were going to be here tonight.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. I did not see the parade.
Julie, your wife, right? And then we have that one.
Oh, Julie couldn't make it.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, in the spirit of the theme, we're gonna give her some grace, because it is also like the literal nicest night of 2022, just weather-wise. So anyone who went ahead and signed on to a Zoom tonight is just we owe a debt of gratitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for being
And
here.
probably a dance number, but they're gonna have to wait for that.
That's right. The dance numbers at the end. Yeah. It just gives people like a reason to stick around. Otherwise they're cutting
Exactly.
out at like,
Yeah.
7:20, checking the Cubs score.
Yeah, we've learned that the hard way
Totally.
through the podcast. Yeah.
That we used to have. No, we actually have a podcast. So we should like do formal introductions, right? So I'm Heidi.
We should.
Yeah, I'm Heidi Stevens. I am a writer here in Chicago, and for a long time worked at the Chicago Tribune, where I often would interview John as an expert source. And remember when we used to do those Facebook Lives out of the newsroom? Yeah, every Wednesday I would host a Facebook Live, and John would come in and be my expert source for those. And we struck up a friendship and started a podcast in, what do you think, 2019?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
And basically I have no expertise in anything, but John has lots of degrees and has written books and is, well, I'll let you introduce your own little bio, but we get together every once in a while and do a podcast, and I ask him questions about parenting and relationships and life. And so we thought we would do one live here tonight for you all.
Yeah. I'm John, and I am a psychologist. I've been practicing for a few years older than I am. And I work with teenagers and their parents. I've been doing it for a really long time. And I'm glad we're here because it's really, really difficult now to parent a teenager. And you can have so much patience and so much grace and so much knowledge and still feel like it's difficult. So I'm glad we're here to talk about it. And I'm going to already contradict you, Heidi, a little bit because you say you have very little expertise. I take enormous issue with that. If anybody who reads Heidi knows that she knows this topic inside and out and is going to impart an enormous amount of wisdom tonight.
Other people's wisdom, maybe, if I've read it, but thank you. That's sweet of you. I'm glad we're here tonight too, and I'm eager to sort of jump in and start picking your brain. I think, it's obviously a well-established fact that young people are in crisis. The Surgeon General released that unprecedented report not long ago. It's front page news in the New York Times. Probably everybody who's tuned in right now knows a family or even a family member who's struggling. Is there something, I wonder, that pops in your head as you read those articles or you see people's posts on social media or talk to your teen clients? Is there something that you wish parents knew, like a disconnect maybe between what you see and hear from the young people in your office and what you see parents doing or not doing?
Yeah, so much. So cut me off when you need to. But I'm not grateful for this pandemic in any way except one, and that is that it finally got the Surgeon General and the CDC to look at mental health and the mental health of teenagers in a really serious way and recognize, oh, we have a crisis here. Yeah. The truth of the matter is that crisis isn't new. It's not new in the midst of the pandemic, Heidi. It's like it goes back years. You and I have talked about it on our podcast. We knew a long time ago. Yeah. I'm glad it's kind of like front page news. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is tricky to parent teenagers today because for the first time, this generation of kids is living in the shadows in a lot of their lives. We're not seeing a lot of what they're doing. We are not privy to a lot of what they're thinking. We're not hearing what they're listening to. We're not watching what they're watching. Their lives are oftentimes like a complete, behind closed doors kind of mystery to us. And
in a different room, not watching the family television set.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, so Yeah, so it makes it so tricky to know, and they're not necessarily always really verbal and forthcoming. And so parents, and I worked with this today. It's an interesting day to talk about it because parents have an inclination, really natural inclination, I think, oftentimes to press, like, what's going on in your life, like, or to kind of look at the pieces of their lives they have access to. So we have portals and we have Life 360, and we can do our kind of espionage and learn what we can. We can write to teachers and the deans and get some information about our kids. But oftentimes that creates this divide. It doesn't necessarily like pull us and our kids together. Oftentimes it's like, hey, what's going on in school? I didn't know you were doing so poorly, or, like, I didn't know you weren't showing up sometimes, or whatever. And so I think the gist of what you're going to hear from me tonight is, and it's you're going to get tired of hearing it, but it's like fostering this connection with your kid. The myth I think we carry about teenagers in particular is it's awful. You're going to go through this awful, awful time. You're going to go through this disconnected time, and it's going to be really, really difficult. And just like if you could just get them to 18 and on to college or trade school or some next adventure, then you've succeeded and thank God it's over. When in fact, you really don't want it to be over. You really want to create a relationship for a lifetime. And these are important years too that you probably want to enjoy. You don't just want to hold your breath and make it through them. So those are the buttons I'm going to be pressing all night, I think.
I like those buttons, and it reminds me of, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but I don't know if everyone here has heard us talk about this, but I think about this a lot. That's something that the Grown and Flown authors told me, which is that, if you're lucky, and you and your child or your children, all live long lives, that you're going to have far more time with your child where you're both adults than you will when, they're children and you're raising them, right? So like you're raising them for 18-ish years. And then ideally you get 20, maybe 30, maybe more years together where you're not actively raising them, disciplining them, like snowplowing them onto a right path. You're just in each other's lives, hopefully enjoying the fruits of each other's labor and each other's company. And those years can be so much richer and more lovely if the first 18, right, weren't filled with tension and strife and toxicity and, most of your conversations being about what the parent portal showed. Which honestly kind of completely changed how I parent. After I heard that, I was like, God, I'm going to let kind of a lot go, or like not push some buttons that I might have pushed before, because that one's kind of just about me being right, or like that one's kind of just about me making my point, or that one. And like, I don't know that I would do that in a relationship that I was trying to cultivate for 20, 30, 40 more years. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's brilliant. And first of all, anybody who doesn't know what Grown and Flown is, it's an online group. There's a book called Grown and Flown. And if you're looking for support from other parents or just validation from a point of view, it's a beautiful Facebook book group that I really, really love. And I love that you cite that bit of wisdom from them, because I think sometimes when our kids are teenagers, we start to think like teenagers do. If you think about some of the hallmarks of being a teenager, if you think back to what it was like when we were teenagers, everything feels urgent and immediate, right? Like what's going on this weekend, right? It's like either awesome or super upsetting and feels like the end of the world. And we can tell our kids, hey, it's no big deal, and 5 years from now, it's not going to matter. But we all remember at 16 how much it mattered, and sometimes we get into that headspace as parents, where we almost like regress to adolescence, and we get into this thinking like, oh, this is really, really urgent. This grade in chemistry is everything.
Everything.
It's the linchpin to your future. And so
Right.
we have to focus on it all the time.
Right.
And we miss this all the rest of the relationship. And I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I agree with you, Heidi, that there's so much more there, right? There's so much more to play with and focus on. And if you generate a relationship that you're picturing 20 years from now or 30 years from now being a joyful one and a fun one, then you're more likely to create more fun now.
Yeah.
And then chemistry becomes a thing. It's certainly a discussion to be had, but it's not the only one. And it's not, you don't have to keep coming back to it, like, and I think we do way too much of that. And then we're like just Charlie Brown's teacher, like we're just making noises.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think you and George are a good example of this living out or playing out, I should say, in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
Talk about George.
Yes. We have to be careful to
subject.
talk about any of our kids because we're both just going to beam about our kids. But yes.
Totally.
So as it happens, I have a son who is 26, and this is kind of, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, Heidi, but by happenstance, because I'm a psychologist, have a very small house. George grew up in very little space, so he didn't really have the option of like going up to his room to do his homework or just hang out. So he was always kind of in the space with my wife, Julie, and I. And so we found that like, oh, well, if he's talking to us, and we're kind of generating this conversation. And every once in a while, it's like, hey, dude, put the phone down, get back to your homework. But most of the time, we were creating these in-jokes and having this fun and having these deep conversations that in the end, in retrospect, carried us through every difficult time we ever ran into. Yeah. And now at 26, I can easily say that my son is like my best friend. Like he and I do a lot together. And if I miss out on this part, I can just say, you're right, Heidi. In retrospect, like it would be devastating. If he felt like, I'll show up on Christmas and I'll show up on Easter because it's perfunctory, it's my job, but that's it. That's what you're going to get from me,
Right.
And some of us listening or some of us speaking even may feel some of that with our own parents that, like, I don't know anybody in particular, but
I don't know what
anybody, right? And we really don't want to create that, because I have to say, being close to your adult child is a particular joy that I did not anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about going back a tiny bit to chemistry and getting in the mindset of a teen when you're raising a teen. Like, I think a lot about one of Michelle Eichard's little pearls of wisdom about the kind of a liberating thing about raising teenagers versus younger kids, toddlers and babies, is that you actually have so much more time to address their problematic behaviors, right? Like it's usually not like them walking toward a electrical socket with a fork, like, or trying to run into traffic. Like you're usually not pulling them from, a death situation. Usually the conversations are something that like you can pause and like really think how you want to address it, or you can address it in the moment and really screw up and come back later and be like, you know what, I screwed that up. Like, I don't like the way I talked to you about that one. Let me try that again. Or I don't like how we left it yesterday. Let's go back and talk about that some more. Like, you can do that with a teenager in a way that you don't get to do with a 2-year-old, right? Like, you do that with a 2-year-old, they fell out of the tree. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do people still climb trees? I think that's a thing. Yeah,
for sure. And the parental do-over with teenagers is one of Michelle's greatest pearls, because it suggests not just that like you get this opportunity to say, boy, like I came on really heavy last night. I'm really sorry about that.
Mhm.
But it also, unlike for your 2-year-old, it models this kind of like, oh, maybe what feels like a crisis or this urgent situation or this thing that's irreconcilable and unfixable
Yeah.
is actually just a situation. And you can easily back out of it, fix it, repair it, and you're better off for it. And you've shown your child like, that's how easily it can be, right? It can be really big and dramatic and awful, or it can be like, hey, I'm really sorry about how that went.
Yeah.
My part, I take it back, and if I said anything that was hurtful, and what a great thing to say to your kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What a great thing to be able to do to guide them, but also to honestly cop to like, hey, I'm not perfect either, and we're now in a relationship that's kind of not quite adult to adult, because you can't just take the car whenever you want, and there's certain things you have to do around here, but I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to your point of view, and I might change my mind in light of it. Like you have some power, you have some agency over things.
Yep. Yeah. And modeling for them how to treat their own friends, right? Or colleagues if they've got part-time jobs.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm big on grace. I'm always writing about it and talking about it. And I'm especially big on grace for young people, because I think that so much of their lives feels do or die. Like every moment feels like it's make or break for their future. And I feel like we tell them that a lot too. Like, if you put that on social media, you'll never get into college. Or, I mean, we're always running into these like my hair is on fire scenarios with them. So like everything feels like what you're doing now is going to affect your future. Instead of just like, I don't know, try that. It might be fun, or it might be a chance to grow a little bit, or learn something new, or try and fail and pick yourself back up and try again. So how do we as parents like calm down the voices inside our heads that say, I mean, like, if you're going to be in that class, it screws up your whole junior year, and then that screws up college, and then that screws up your life, and you're going to live in my basement and vape, and nothing's going to go well. Because it's not necessarily even that the voice is wrong per se.
Right.
Like, I mean, that B might screw up your junior year, which might screw up college, but like all those things can logically be true. But it's also not necessarily helpful. So like, what do we do with that voice?
Okay, so first I want to warn you that I'm going to turn this question around on you at some point.
Okay.
Because I consider you, Heidi, the expert on grace. Like, I think if you go ahead when we're done and Google Heidi Stevens grace, you're going to get 300 articles that are going to fill your heart up. So.
Well, the first 290 will be about my hair, but then after that,
well, of course,
the ones about grace come in around like 291.
You got to focus on the headlines. It's the reporting, right? But I love your point about kids and grace, because I think we forget not just what it's like to be a teenager, but what our kids go through now. I work with so many families where parents forget, oh, my kid's going through this unprecedented 2-year plus long pandemic and trying to navigate friendships, navigate school. And he or she is having a hard time. And I forget, like, not to just be angry or frustrated or try to do for them sometimes, right? And make it easier for them, instead of just extending them some grace, right? Like, this is really hard. This is really hard, and I get it. And I think you're doing an amazing job just by making it through it. And that might seem like such like meaningless pablum, but I can tell you, like, witnessing it in rooms like this, that it is unbelievable how it catches a child's attention. Like, children you would not think would have any space to accept grace from their parents, where you think like they're walled off, there's miles of distance between them, there's so much work to be done. And sometimes just extending that moment of grace, that creates an immediate like connection where you're dealing with something akin to collaboration instead of this kind of
Gotcha.
separation.
Got you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
conflict. Yeah.
Mhm. Stay on that for a minute. I want to hear more about like, do you see like, talk us through like a breakthrough moment in your office without obviously betraying anyone's, privacy or identity, but like, is it as simple and profound as a parent, instead of cutting their kid off or redirecting their kid, just being like, that sounds really hard. I hadn't thought of it that way. Or like walk me through that a little bit.
Okay. All right. I'll walk you through one of my favorite ones. It goes back a couple of years. But I was working, I've got this, I'm not violating anybody's confidence here. I've asked for permission because I like this story a lot. I'm working with a father and son. The son is 17 at the time. And they are really at war. The son is, he is exhibiting behavior that is troubling, right? And dad's method is his dad's method, which is kind of like, I'm going to come down hard on you. I'm going to, really lay constraints down on your behavior. I want that phone. I want those car keys. I want you in the house by 10 o'clock every night. And so, and you can imagine that nothing really progressive comes from that. So in an effort to just change the subject for my own sake, to be honest, I brought up music because I knew both of these guys. I'd met them in separate sessions. I knew they were both into music. And the dad's kind of flippantly talking about like, well, he's into rap and hip hop and all this crap, all this garbage that, how the kids are listening to these days. And the kid's like, well, at least it's not like, Van Halen or, like
Eagles.
And so this little battle goes on, and in between sessions, they start to listen to each other's music. And over time, they start to go to each other's concerts. It's kind of like I call one, then you call one. And they didn't always agree, and they argued a lot about music, but it was a thing for them all of a sudden. This was their point of connection, even when they were kind of like with a wink and a nod saying, like, that's lousy. But sometimes they found like, oh, we like the same thing. Like, this is a pretty good jam. Like, and they would come in and talk about that. And all of a sudden the behavioral stuff starts to kind of fade a little bit. Like it becomes, not just less discussed about, but less pronounced. Like the kid learns like he has respect for his dad. He knows his dad like respects him. So this connection, they kind of meet in the middle in a lot of different ways. So instead of going directly to the source that we think is a source, right? Like, stop doing this thing. Dad had the presence of mind to recognize, oh, maybe part of the thing is we're not good. We're not connected. So like, I'm not seen as an ally or a guide or a consultant or anything positive. I'm an orange cone he's working around, like he has nothing to do with me.
Right.
And so he took the cone away and he like became this person who was relatable. And that felt like an extension of grace to me.
I mean, I feel like we're talking about reminding ourselves that our kids are full humans and not like projects to manage.
Yeah, for sure. And they are. I mean, they are full humans and they are not projects to manage. And so this feels like a moment where I want to turn this around on you a little bit. And I don't want you to violate anybody's confidence on your end, but I feel like the way you
I only have 2 kids. It's going to be pretty obvious which ones I'm talking about.
That's fair. That's fair. But I feel like the way you parent those 2 kids is filled with grace. Like I feel like you do see them as human beings. I feel like you, the grace that I see from hearing you talk about your kids, watching you post about your kids, is that you find the space to celebrate them.
Mm.
And not just like, you know, the home run, but just celebrate a moment of them.
Mhm.
Do you mind
Yeah.
speaking to that a little bit?
Thank you. I love that you said that because I try to do that. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like walking alongside my kids is like the biggest privilege of my life, and I didn't expect to feel that. I never really envisioned myself having kids. I wasn't dead set against it. I wasn't dead set on it. I hadn't given it a lot of thought. So when I had kids and just had this like heart explosion about them, I was like, I just get to like be in their, like, I just get to walk alongside them and be in their lives. And I don't feel, I mean, in some ways um I probably err on the side of not disciplining them, or I don't know, orange coning them much at all. But I just feel like if I can be their soft place to land and their ally and the person who I always wish I had as a kid, which was just someone who like shut up and listened, and really really hear them. That's kind of the biggest thing I can offer them, is just to like bear witness to their lives and help them through it, and not approach any of it with like this predetermined path for them, because how would I know, right? Like, how would I know what path they're supposed to be on? I mean, you know, I'm sounding like I let them leave the house like, you know, naked and smoking pot, which I don't. I really don't. I mean, they haven't asked to yet. We'll see. No,
We'll see when that shows up, right?
Right. Will's not in high school yet, so no. I just, you know, obviously I help them make good choices whenever I can, but I really feel like my role is to walk alongside them, more than, you know, snowplow them into a certain path. So if that's kind of my North Star, it's pretty easy to just like shut up and listen. And when they do want to talk, do a lot of like, wow, are you kidding me? That happened? Like, that sounds so hard. Then what did you do? Or like, you know, a lot of kind of like, I talk to my friends. And I find that they'll ask for my advice when they want it. And I think that's because they do see me as an ally, and not someone who's trying to like catch them doing bad stuff, you know? So
do you find that they're often looking for advice, or do you find like sometimes they just need that, wow, that sucks, that's got to be really hard?
They usually just need empathy. And they usually know in their heart of hearts what to do in a situation. They might need me to sort of like ask questions that guide them to that place, but I also feel like kids know this world that they're trying to survive in and navigate better than we do. Like, it's not, I don't know, there's some universal things about being 16 in, you know, the 80s or 90s versus now, but there aren't many. I don't think so. You know, I'm fully aware that me saying like, well, when I was a sophomore and, you know, Carly said this about me, I did this, is like, okay, and like, you might as well have grown up on Mars, because none of that applies to anything that I'm living. You know, I'm a little light on the advice just because I don't know how relevant my experience is to their experience, you know?
Yeah. No, and I think I like everything you said there, but there's a couple of lanes I really love. Like, yeah, that advice is available, but it's not often sought. And not often do kids see it as relevant, right? They just want to be heard more often than not. And the more you can kind of celebrate, like, oh, I just get to walk this path with them. Like, I get to see what happens. I don't have this predetermined idea, this notion of who they're supposed to be.
Right.
I'm good with the awe and the wonder of it all is like just seeing, like, you know, like kind of like bearing witness to that. And I think we forget that too, like at the high school where my son went, every semester that a kid, and I loathe this, but every semester that a kid makes the honor roll, you get a sticker, you get a bumper sticker. And so some people make sure, and they're alternating colors, the school colors, so the colors were blue and yellow. So you can drive through the town where George grew up and see a car with 16 blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow. And then every once in a while, if you see 2 blues, you wonder like, ooh, that kid didn't make the honor roll one time, but you realize like this has to do with us. Like, I remember asking George, like, oh, you made the honor roll. Should we put this on the car? And he's like, no, I have no interest in that.
Do you want me to move out?
Right. That's because that's not about me. I don't care. And that's
My daughter would smother me in my sleep with a pillow if I tried to put an honor roll sticker on her car.
Right. But the beauty of like being able to, kind of just walk the path. And I think the hardest thing about parenting now is letting our kids make their mistakes, and whether that's like, shouldn't you put in like another hour of studying for that AP test? Or, shouldn't you be trying out or getting ready, getting in shape for the team? Or, as opposed to like, letting them stumble a little bit. And I will say like, I was terrible at that. Like my wife and I kind of outsourced that to coaches and teachers and people who were able to be tougher with George and expect more resilience and competence from him than maybe we did, because we were like, no, he can't be a swimmer. He needs to sleep in,
Oh, yeah.
And I think, our kids can rise to the occasion if we're smart enough to, and this was not any wisdom on our part, but if we can just allow ourselves to let the other adults in their lives do their jobs, play their roles, an awful lot of good can happen that has nothing to do with us. And if our fear and judgment and ego can be like somewhere else, lots of good things can come of that. And maybe the most important things, I think for my son, I can say for sure. Yeah.
No, I'm such a fan of the village approach for sure. I'm going to pop into the chat because we're getting a lot of questions. Okay, so Kate says, I'm the mother of 2 young daughters, 6.5 and 4.5. How and what can I work on now? This is such a good question, to set us up for success in our relationships and trust. I love those words, Kate. Through their teen years and beyond. What 6.5 and 4.5.
Say again, Kate. 190.
So I'm sorry. They're 6.5 and 4.5. Kate.
Got it. Yeah. So one thing that's changed, I think, in a generation is we were talking about fully formed human beings, and we see our teenagers as fully formed human beings. I don't think we're yet at the place where we see our 6.5 and 4.5-year-olds typically as fully formed human beings, but every once in a while, I get the opportunity to talk to really young kids, and they blow me away with what first of all, they have access to so much more because of technology, and so they know more than we knew at that age. So developmentally, they're not our 4.5, they're their 4.5, and that's a little more advanced, a little more sophisticated. So a lot of the things that we're saying now about like kind of developing that kind of foundation for your relationship 10 years from now and 20 and 30, you can apply now. You wouldn't want to have the same discussions, but your kids probably know that certain things are going on in their class. And you can just ask, so what's going on in school? What's it like there? Like, what's it like for you? Are you having fun? And if you just kind of engage your kids in open-ended questions, and this, by the way, is all that happens in therapy rooms. This is what we do. So you can.
We're all getting our PhDs right now.
Right. You can skip Blue Cross and you can skip me and just go right to. and go right to the better story. which is
Open-ended
your 6 and a
question.
half- Yeah,
Yeah.
your kids. And just have those discussions with them, like, like engage them in what they're about, what they know, what they're interested in. And then they start to kind of see themselves, I think, really early as like more competent, fully formed human beings with tastes and interests and capabilities. And so I absolutely encourage you to talk to your kids, discipline your kids when you need to, because sometimes they're going to be walking by the electrical outlet with the fork.
Right.
That happened with my 4.5-year-old 20 years ago. And that's a crisis moment. But the rest of the time is connecting time, and there's an awful lot of that.
Yeah. I remember saying to my kids all the time when they were little, like, we're on the same team, baby, I'm on your team. Like that was my go-to, like when they were tantruming and whatever, I would always remind them, like, I'm on your team. Like, I'm not trying to win and you lose, or you win and I lose. Like, we're on the same team. And that was like an easy thing for them to get their heads around, I think. I also had a major epiphany. I remember writing a column about it when my son, I picked him up from school one day and he was sobbing that this stupid Frisbee thingy that he won in one of those, like, run around the gym 800 times till you get a prize that I could have got, at Target for 50 cents. It was supposed to arrive that day and it didn't. He was despondent and it was the worst day of his life. And, like, of course, as an adult, you want to be like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a Frisbee and, like, there's homeless people we just passed on the street. And, like, are you making a big deal? Like, you have all the, like, perspective that you would like to impart. And also just, like, you want to hear about my day. Like, all the things pop in your head that are, like, incredibly ridiculous and pointless and also super tempting to give voice to. And I was like, I'm going to try, like, leaning into this one. I'm going to, like, lean into this tantrum. And I was like, you're kidding that didn't show up. And he was like, it didn't show up. And I was like, stop, that's the worst. And he was like, it was the worst. I'm like, that is literally the worst. And he's like, I know.
Wow.
And then he was done. Like, okay.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, that was, like, for sure 45 minutes shorter than all the other tantrums. I wonder if I should just go ahead and, like, validate the tantrum and then we move on. And that kind of always worked. Like, oh my God, you're kidding. That sucks. It sucks. It does suck.
And I don't know how old he was.
Like, I didn't have to tell you there were homeless people who don't ever get Frisbees ever in their lives. I didn't, like, none of those things needed to happen because all you needed was someone to be like, oh, that sucks. It does suck. And we're done.
What presence of mind. I mean, man, that really, you had to eliminate all these other easier options, right? Almost maybe a little lazier in a way.
I think I was just tired. Yeah. I think I was just tired and traffic was bad on the Kennedy.
Okay. So, but you stumbled upon something really cool there, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Well,
right. and to your son at whatever age he was then, your response was appropriate, right? It was like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, because he couldn't believe it, right? His tantrum wasn't for nothing.
Literally unbelievable. Like, you say it's arriving on that day and it doesn't. Like, what am I doing with that?
Right.
Stopping in my mom's car. I mean, clearly. Okay.
There's what? Good.
Next question, right?
Yeah. Well, I have one thought I want to throw in here, if it's okay, really quickly. I don't know why I'm thinking of this now, but when we talk about parenting, you and I did a talk together pre-pandemic to a group of people, and somebody came up to me and said, like, I realized I really have to get on this parenting thing, and I remember panicking and thinking, ooh, I think that's not the message I meant to send out. Like, so one note I want to throw out there, because I think it's important, is most of parenting is not is not parenting. It's not like
Mhm.
kind of like working out of some guidebook that you get with a
Right.
lawnmower or something. Like,
Right. That's right.
like, following through, like it's not picking up a book that I wrote or Michelle Eichert wrote or Grown and Flown and like, working your way through that and making sure like, okay, I've dotted that I and I've done chapter 4. Now I'll work my way through. Sometimes, most of the time, it's just like, what's my gut reaction here and what's the connection here? And maybe I do nothing. Maybe I say nothing and just let them. Most of the time, I think that's what we do.
Yeah. And maybe I do it wrong and then I go back the next day and I get to try again a
Yeah.
different way, especially if I can admit to the
Yeah.
people I love that I did it wrong. Okay, this is from Steve. Hey, Duff and Heidi, do you think it's possible that for some teens, mental health issues have become the in thing? I saw a text from my daughter to a friend along the lines of, he's cool, he's got ADD and depression issues. And then there's the celebrity factor. I know it's good that celebrities are normalizing mental health problems for awareness, but at the same time, I feel like it may encourage kids' behavior to be like their idols. Like when I was a kid, to be like my rock and roll idols, I grew my hair long, wore grungy clothes, drank Jack, and smoked pot. Wow, that's a fun childhood. Are there
Steve is letting it all out. I like that.
Are there similarities that are contributing to the rise in mental health issues? Good question.
It's a really good question. And I think the answer is complicated because for sure, part of the answer is yes. I work with kids who get very attached to diagnoses, in part because if you are a hashtag anxiety person on TikTok or Snapchat, you can spend the rest of your life looking at videos of people who are anxious and you can say, I relate to that. That's who I am. That's really some core part of my identity. And that could be anxiety or depression or ADHD or suicidal thinking or like eating disorders. All sorts of difficulties can show up that way. So I worry sometimes that our kids over identify with some emotional difficulty as opposed to defining themselves in other ways that are maybe more adaptive, and forgetting that all of those issues can be treated and can be managed. And, there are people in my profession and there are psychiatrists and there are school counselors and psychologists and all sorts of people who can help mitigate some of that stuff. But if you're really attached to like, I'm part of this group, I'm part of this crowd on TikTok that is all about anxiety, so that's my thing. That to me, I think is a little bit of a dangerous thing that we have to keep our eye on.
Yeah.
By the same token, though, if you go down the rabbit hole a little bit, you'll see that kids are super supportive of each other in these things. And oftentimes they're really pretty good therapists for one another. Like, hey, I had this panic attack in math class yesterday. I literally saw a TikTok day before yesterday, I think, that said this, where this girl talked about her panic attack. And she said, really, the deep breathing thing really worked for me. So I really was able to stay there and do like 5 or 6 deep breaths. And she demonstrated the breaths and kind of showed like, breathe in, count to 5, like to hold it for a count of 5. Breathe out for a slow count of 5. Do it again. And in a really palatable way, was able to show a whole bunch of people, I think like 15,000 people had seen this thing, how to manage an anxiety attack, which, that's a lot of really good work. So it's a real mixed bag. And I think we just want to, the best we can do right now, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Heidi, is keep, know something about what our kids are looking at. Understand something about like Snapchat and TikTok and even Instagram, which I think there are elements of it we don't know very well. And on occasions, maybe sit down and watch with them so that you have some feel for, they're not going to show you everything they're watching, but they'll show you some things and you'll get a feel for whether it's useful or not. And at least it'll give you some open-ended questions to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I think, I mean, a lot of what you, Steve, are saying in this question also makes me think about how much of our teen years are figuring out who we are, right? Like
Yeah.
What is my identity? I'm going to try on a couple different ones. And, you know, the range of acceptable identities, at least in a lot of communities, is growing, right? I mean, my friend Elaine and I were talking the other day about how she went to a new school, and the rumor went around that she was a lesbian. And that was, I mean, she was done socially. That most places would not be the case anymore. Being identified by someone as a lesbian would not be the end of your social life in 2022.
No.
In many schools.
Right.
That's progress, right? So the range of available identities that don't also completely upend your social life or your ability to live like a full, happy high school career has grown, and that's a good thing. It also means that kids are going to try on a few different ones that don't stick, right? And I mean, just like, you're talking about in this question that you drank Jack and smoked pot, some of them aren't going to be super healthy to try on.
Right.
And you're going to outgrow them or not. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way at all. It's just like, I say that to say we shouldn't wave our hands like, oh, well, he's just trying things on, like, because sometimes you try stuff on and it sticks, and it shouldn't have. But I also think, like,
Sure.
if your kid's talks to his or her friends and says, like, I have anxiety, I have to do these deep breathing exercises to manage it, and they don't actually have anxiety, what they actually have is like too much homework, or just some, they kind of want to be like this person they idolize, like, okay. I mean, is that like, that's not so bad. Like, they learn to do deep breathing exercises, and then 6 months from now they're bored with the label of anxiety because they didn't actually have it. I mean, kind of no harm, no foul, right? Which I don't mean to say flippantly, because of course you can, be put on medication and start down
Sure.
paths once you are labeled with a certain mental health disorder that is it's serious. You go down serious paths when you get diagnosed with certain things. So I'm not trying to be cavalier about it, but I'm also trying to say, like, I do think a big part of being a teenager is like figuring out who you want to be in this world, and sometimes you just try something that doesn't stick, or sometimes it sticks for 6 months and then you move on. And I don't think that has to be all that alarming for us as the parents. I think it can kind of be like, okay, learn something new about yourself, learn something new about us by watching how we responded to you learning that thing about yourself. It doesn't all have to be like, an alarming trend, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. No, I'm so glad you kind of punctuated that point, because yeah, it makes perfect sense. And right, certain things are serious issues, but there is this liberty that kids have now, in terms of their identities, whether it's sexual or gender identities, or whether I'm one of the jocks, or I'm in the drama crowd, or I relate more to people who seem anxious, or like even
Mm-hmm.
I do think kids try things on, and as parents, I think your tone is perfect there, Heidi, because I think sometimes we're like, oh my God, like you're what? And
Mm-hmm.
I think if we could just like breathe, either we will recognize, okay, this is who you are, and we'll figure our way through that, or you evolve into a different type of identity, and that's okay too. But the withdrawing support, that's where I think we get into trouble as parents. First of all, like in that 20 to 30 year like range, that can come back to us in a negative way. But also now, it's because there's so many identities available to kids. I think it's a little confusing at times. I work with I work with a boy who is him. He, but somebody who is absolutely, by looking at him, you wouldn't know if he were male or female. You wouldn't know if he were a Democrat or a Republican. He definitely has a point of view on this. He wears nail polish and sweatshirts and skirts and is a most fabulous human being, you know, and it's that last part that I think we can miss is like, you know, how cool is it that you get to be who you are in this moment, right. And that may evolve or that may not. That may be solidly who you are. Yeah. But you know, it's probably a better story than some of the restrictions that a lot of us grew up with, where it was like super binary, and I don't just mean in one way, like in every way. It was like you're either this or that. Right. Yeah, and pick a lane and stick to it. Because I think a lot of times adults feel like, well, I don't want to be punked by this kid. So like I gotta get to the true thing before they get the idea that they can like pull the wool over my eyes. And I'm sort of like, I don't know, maybe you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes right now. We'll figure it out eventually. Like I used to pretend there was a Santa, and now we all know there's not. Like you guys believed in the Easter Bunny, and I lied to you about it. But no, we don't. Like, it's sort of like, I don't know if I need to like call you out on the thing that seems like a little nebulous right now. Yeah. Right in the moment. Or can we just go with it? And like, I mean, I know it sounds like I'm making light of this stuff, but I really do sort of carry that around on some bigger issues too. Like, I don't know about that one, but I'm gonna shut up right now because I don't know about that one. And like, I think the truth is gonna become clearer down the road. I'm gonna go ahead and wait till we're down the road a little bit. If it turns out that I was kind of being punked, if I still stayed an ally, like, I don't know who lost. Right. Nobody. Sounds like nobody. Right. Yeah. Okay, final question. Would love to hear your thoughts on encouraging individuality while also understanding what it means to be part of a group and community with others who aren't exactly like them. Good question. So, yeah, Eileen, feel free to add more context if you want, but I think like how do you make sure your kid doesn't feel like they're losing their voice and identity to fit in with the peer group, right? I think so. Yeah, that's what I'm gathering there, right? And the truth is that you don't know that for sure, and it reminds me of what you just said, that you know, your kids might not know that for sure. And they try things on, you know, not always. Sometimes it's abundantly clear. Sometimes kids at like 7 years old know just who they are, what they're interested in. But that's not usually the case. Usually kids try on a couple different identities over the course, especially of adolescence. And I think what feels trickier to parents, I think sometimes, is how do we let our kids know that they're part of a greater community? But the truth of the matter is, and you know, having the luxury of like being in the room with kids sometimes, they're pretty good at that. Like, you know, I honestly, like, you know, that worries me so much less than it ever has before. They care about the people around them in their immediate sphere and all the way out to the global sphere. Like kids are worried about families in Ukraine who have to be underground, you know, yeah. So there's empathy. Yeah, totally. I also think like this is, you know, it's tempting to sort of quash any like
abstinence or, you know, failure to just sort of step in line in our kids. But I do think that like, it, you know, within reason, and of course, obviously also teaching respect and the fact that, you know, your elders often know better than you do. If you can not completely squash that instinct in your kid, you do want them to be pretty good at going against the grain when it comes to like, everybody else is getting in the car with that drunk driver. Like, I'm not going to be the one who says no. Like, everybody else is, you know, taking a hit on that, you know, joint when it comes around. Like, I'm not going to be the one who says no. Like, if your kid like gets kind of a decent amount of practice at being the one who says no, right? Like at home, or in, you know, family settings, like, no, I don't feel like hugging that uncle, he's weird, or like, you know, and you don't immediately shut down their nose or shut down their abstinence. You know, if you kind of pick and choose, like, yeah, actually that one makes sense, I'm gonna let them say no to that. And they get a little practice at that. I do feel like that can serve them well in this setting we're talking about, where like they can still be their individual selves with their good judgment and good self-preservation skills, even as they try to fit into the larger community. Because you're not always going to be there, right? When they're leaving that party, and they could get the free ride home with the drunk person, or they could, you know, Uber and have to explain to you that bill, or bus and get home an hour later instead of 15, you know, all the things. So I do think like letting your kids get, I mean, I do this with social media. Like my kids do not want to be the stars of my show, to the extent that we all have shows on social. Like I have to ask them, can I post this photo? And 99% of the time they say no, absolutely not. And I don't, you know, and I don't,
Right.
because like I want them to practice saying no, and then I want them to practice having their no respected by people who love them, because like that's pretty important in friendships and intimate relationships and all that stuff. Like you need to know what it feels like to say no and have the person hear your no and honor your no, and also walk away from the people who don't hear and honor that. And here comes Sydney. Must be 8 o'clock. Oh, it's 8:02.
It's 8:03.
Oh my God.
Yes.
We have overstayed our welcome.
I gotta go to bed.
Everyone's got to go to bed now, I promise. All right. Well, it looks like you got through most of the questions very deftly, Heidi. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
And as always, I've heard you guys speak a couple of times. Always great together. And I think we could, of course, let this conversation go on for hours, but want to thank you both so much for doing this tonight and being as flexible as you were over these last couple of months. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation, and maybe we'll be able to do it again soon one day in person. So, all right. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Bye.